Hello, everyone. It's lovely to be here again. Lovely to be with you all again. And I don't like to prepare ahead of time what I'm going to say at a gathering like this. I trust that whatever comes in the moment is tailored to the moment. So I joined this gathering 15 minutes or so ago just to hear the tail end of Neda. And perhaps not surprisingly, Neda's beautiful last song gave me the subject matter for my brief introduction. I think your song, Neda, was called God is in My Mind. And the refrain that kept coming back, God is in everything that I see. And these two phrases really, if properly understood, encapsulate the entire understanding of non-duality. In fact, if one were to distill the last 3,000 years of non-duality into a single phrase or two single phrases, and were to speak them in traditional religious language, you would end up with these two phrases: God is in my mind, or God is the very nature of my mind, and God is in everything that I see, or God is everything that I see. So thank you, Neda, not only for your beautiful song, but also for giving me the introduction to this presentation. So let us start with the first statement. God is in my mind, or perhaps the way I would say, God is the very nature or essence of my mind. What does this mean? Each of our minds is finite. Thoughts, images, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. How can a finite mind contain God's infinite being? Something that is finite obviously cannot contain the infinite. And yet here we have this statement that God is the very nature of our mind. The essence of our mind is not finite, it is infinite. In what way can we understand this? I would suggest that what it means is that whilst the content of our mind is finite, thoughts, images, feelings, sensations, and perceptions, that the context within which the finite content of our mind arises does not share the limits of our finite experience. So is there anything, how can we translate this into our experience? Is there anything in our actual experience that is unlimited? If we look at our thoughts, images, feelings, memories, sensations, perceptions of the world, activities, relationships, all of these are temporary, finite, limited. But there is one element of our experience that is not limited, that is not temporary, finite, changing. And it is simply the fact of being aware, or awareness itself. Everything we are aware of is temporary, finite, and changing. But the fact of being aware itself does not share the limits of what we are aware of. Even since I have been speaking for these last 5 minutes, our thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions have changed. But the awareness with which each of these are known, the awareness in which each of these appear, and ultimately the awareness out of which each of these is made, remains the same. In other words, whatever it was that was aware of our experience 5 minutes ago is the same as that which is aware of our experience now. What we are aware of has changed, but the fact of being aware remains the same. And this is not just true of our experience 5 minutes ago. Whatever we were aware of 5 days ago, 5 years ago, when we were 5-year-old children, has changed innumerable times since then. But the knowing, or the awareness with which we were aware of our experience as a 5-year-old child, is exactly the same awareness as the awareness with which each of us is currently aware of this experience. The content of awareness, the content of experience is always changing. Awareness itself is never changing. Everything that we are aware of is temporary, finite. But the awareness with which we are aware of our temporary, finite experience, the awareness in which our temporary, finite experience appears and with which it is made, does not share the qualities, the characteristics, the limitations of that experience. So the fact of being aware, or awareness itself, is the single aspect of our experience that has no limitations, that never changes, that is ever present. If we were to remove everything from our experience that can be removed, thoughts, images, feelings, sensations, perceptions, what would remain? Simply empty awareness. It's like removing all the objects from the room in which you are currently sitting. The tables, the chairs, the books, the computer, etc. What remains? Empty space. It's like closing down all the programs on our computer. What remains? The transparent screen. All the objects that appear in our room are limited, but the space itself does not share their limits. It is unlimited or infinite. Likewise, the awareness with which our experience is known, in which our experience arises, and out of which our experience is made, or of which our experience is the activity, is unlimited. Just as the space in our room is not really the space in our room. It extends way beyond the four walls of our room. So the awareness that seems to be in our mind is not really contained within a limited mind. It extends way beyond the limits of a finite mind. And it is in this sense that it is said that God is in my mind, or rather God is the very nature or essence of my mind. In fact, in the ultimate analysis, there are no individual minds, just as there are no individual physical spaces in the universe. There is just one physical space in the universe, apparently enclosed by numerous buildings. But if we take a sample of the space inside each building, it is always the same unlimited space. Likewise, I would suggest that there is one infinite consciousness or awareness in reality, seemingly enclosed by each of our bodies or minds. But in fact, if we take a sample of the fact of being aware, that is, if awareness takes a sample of itself, it finds no limits in itself. Our awareness is not really our awareness. It is God's awareness. I don't mean to imply by this, of course, that God is a being who has an attribute of awareness. I would suggest that infinite awareness or infinite self-aware being is what is traditionally referred to as God. And this infinite self-aware being is not only the very essence of our being, but is the very essence of the universe. In other words, infinite awareness extends way beyond the limits of each of our finite minds. It is the reality of each of our minds, but it is not contained within or limited to each of our minds. It extends way beyond the finite mind and is the very reality of the universe. And this is where the second phrase in Nada's beautiful song, God is in everything that I see. God is the very essence of my own mind on the inside. And God is the very essence of everything that I see or experience on the outside. The same infinite, indivisible whole or reality made out of unlimited, ever-present awareness, or traditional religious language, spirit, or in common parlance, love. We use the word love to indicate the experience of the absence of otherness. When we feel the absence of otherness or the absence of separation, we refer to it as love. From the perspective of infinite awareness, if we can call it a perspective, or from God's perspective, there is no other. Just as there is only one space in the universe, so there is only one reality made out of pure consciousness, or spirit, or awareness, which is also the experience known as love, the absence of otherness. That's why this tradition is sometimes referred to as non-duality. A single, infinite, and indivisible whole who shines on the inside as our knowledge of ourself, the feeling of being, or the sense I am, and who shines on the outside as the world. Divested of all the qualities that it inherits from experience. The fact of being aware, or awareness itself, is free of any agitation or lack. And for this reason, its nature is said to be peace or joy. Although we may not realize it to begin with, every time we feel peace or joy, we are experiencing the unlimited, ever-present, self-aware being that is the very nature of our mind. In other words, we are experiencing God's presence. God's presence is experienced as peace and joy on the inside, and as love or beauty on the outside. And that is why this approach is sometimes referred to as the direct path to peace and happiness. Most people, in their search for peace and happiness, go via some kind of objective experience, a substance, an activity, a state of mind, a relationship, etc. But here we go directly to the source of happiness, the very nature of our own mind, God's presence, that which shines in us as the knowledge I am, before what I am is conditioned, colored, or qualified by experience. That one is not really veiled or hidden by experience. Being the only reality that there really is, what could veil God's being? There is nothing in reality other than God's being with which God's being could be veiled. Our being, God's being, infinite self-aware being, is not really veiled by experience. It is shining in the midst of all experience. All that is required is to soften the focus of our attention from its objective content, not to get rid of any element of experience, simply to soften the focus of our attention from it, to let it go, to let it pass, thoughts, images, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. And as soon as we soften the focus of our attention from its objective content, God's presence, the fact of being aware, emerges, so to speak, from its obscurity in the background of experience. It was never really obscured, but just as one who is absorbed in a movie seems to lose sight of the screen, so when we are absorbed in the content of experience, we seem to lose sight, lose touch with our essential being. Our essential being, that is God's being, the only being there is. This being cannot be lost, and therefore it cannot be found. But it can be ignored or overlooked. When I say it can be ignored or overlooked, I suggest that we are one thing, and God's being is another thing that we may or may not ignore or overlook. This is not intended. The only being there is, if we can call it a being, or the only self there is, if we can call it a self, is God's self, God's infinite self-aware being. It is God's infinite self-aware being, awareness or consciousness itself, that is so utterly intimately one with the content of experience, that it seems to lose itself in it. It veils itself with its own activity, like an actor, forgetting himself, so involved is he with the part that he plays, without ever actually ceasing to be himself. So God's being is so utterly intimately one with its own activity that it seems to lose itself in it, and as a result seems to become a temporary, finite, limited self. All our suffering on the inside and all conflicts on the outside can be traced back ultimately to this belief that what we essentially are is a temporary, finite, limited self. And thus the resolution for the unhappiness we feel on the inside and for the conflicts we experience on the outside is the recognition of the nature of our being, that its nature is peace and joy and love. All that is necessary is to recognize our essential, irreducible nature and to establish oneself as that, and then to lead a life to the best of our ability in a way that is consistent with its implications. Namely, that reality is a single, infinite and indivisible whole made of consciousness, spirit or love, from which everyone and everything derives its apparently independent existence without ever actually ceasing to be itself. If we truly understand and feel that God or infinite awareness is both the essence of ourself on the inside and the essence of all objects, others, and the world on the outside, then nothing more need be understood. It is only necessary to bring this understanding deeply into our felt experience and to lead a life that is consistent with it. So with that as an introduction, let's start our conversation. Please feel free to ask anything you like.
Thank you, Rupert. We have some hands up, and Anila, would you please unmute your mic?
Hi, Rupert.
Hi, Anila.
Hi. So my question is, I mean, it's great to see you again for sure. I just saw you yesterday.
See you again, yeah.
So one of my question is, so when I'm facing the feeling, and when I have fun facing the feeling, what happens is I notice that I have an agenda, right? That, okay, I'm going to feel better by doing this, facing the feeling process, if I can call it. But it's so fun that sometimes the anxiety or the tension just disappears in the moment. And I know that I haven't faced it with genuineness. So do I just experience it the next time? I mean, of course, it'll come back the next time, I'm sure.
Anila, what is it? Is that on your end or my end?
I muted.
That was someone that had an open mic on a device. I had to remove her. I think we're good. Are you back?
Okay, Anila, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Rupert.
So you talk about facing the feeling. What is it that faces or knows your feeling?
It's awareness. Or
tell us about that.
It's just I am.
It's present, yes. I am awareness, and I am present. Tell us more.
Doesn't have, well, it's not looking to get anything out of anything. So it doesn't have any agenda or boundaries.
Yes,
it has no expectations.
Does it want to get rid of any feelings?
No.
Does it want to improve any feelings?
No.
Does it want to change negative feelings to positive feelings?
No. Like you said, it's like the space in the room. It has no agenda.
It's like the space in the room that doesn't know the meaning of the word resistance, that never says, I don't like what is taking place.
Yes.
So if you are facing your feelings as awareness, or facing your experience, if you are standing knowingly as the presence of awareness in the face of your experience, there's no question of having an agenda. Nor is there a question of having to practice anything. The space of your room, the physical space of your room, does not have to practice not having an agenda with whatever takes place within it. It is its nature, right, to be without agenda. So if you are struggling to face your feelings without an agenda, it means that you're standing as a feeling. You're standing as the mind, as the finite mind. You're not standing as awareness. Don't struggle to make your mind agendaless. No, that's the business of the mind, is to choose, to decide, to have agendas, to try to improve things, etc., etc. No, don't turn this into a practice. This openness, this indiscriminate welcoming of experience is what you are. It is not, don't turn it into something that you do. Otherwise, you'll just set up, your anxiety is already a conflict in your mind. You will just add another layer of conflict to your mind. I must practice this, accepting this anxiety, but to be honest, I don't really want to. And then you'll have this tussle between what you think you should be doing and what you really are feeling. No, none of that is present from the perspective of awareness. Take a step back. Be knowingly the space of awareness. Stand as that one in face of your experience. And then the question of whether or not you have an agenda with it simply won't arise.
Right. That makes perfect sense. I think I just, as you shared, I do it spontaneously. And I know I'm saying doing it, but I'm observing my feelings.
There's no question of doing it. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes,
There's no question of doing it. This is what you are, not what you do. Right. In this approach, welcoming, contemplating, allowing, meditating is nothing to do with the activity or the cessation of the activity of the mind. It has everything to do with being knowingly the open, empty, luminous, and loving presence of awareness. We cannot become that because we never ceased to be it in the first place. We just forgot it. So you just remember who you are and stand as that one in the face of, and indeed in the midst of, all experience. And nice to see you again, Anila.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rupert. We have next Dave Wenrich. Could you unmute your mic, please, Dave?
Hello, Rupert, and thank you. Thank you for your presentation. This is my first time of hearing you, and I'll have to go back and listen to the replay again, but it's really great. I have a question. The Course, A Course in Miracles, very plainly tells us that God did not create the world. But a lot of times when I'm outside, and especially in nature, looking at birds, looking at flowers, we see such design and there seems to be such harmony. Is that what the ego created? This harmony and design and symmetry? Or where did it come from?
Well, there are two ways we can understand the statement, God did not create the world. And the first is to understand that there is no such thing as an independently existing world. So there is no question as to whether or not God created it. There is no such thing as a world in the ultimate analysis. In the ultimate analysis, there is just, in the language of the Course of Miracles or traditional religious language, there is just God's infinite being modulating itself in the form of the world, but never actually ceasing to be itself, never creating something other than itself, simply modulating itself in the form of manifestation. So in fact, from this point of view, that there is no creation. Nothing is created. That which is never ceases to be. And that which is not a created world never even comes into existence. So the question as to whether or not God created it is moot. Now, there is another way in which we could understand the saying God didn't create the world. And this would be to understand that there is something called a world. This is a slightly lower, we're coming off the top of the mountain here. We're coming down the mountain a little bit. In this second response, we credit the world with an existence independent of God, but we say God didn't create it. And as you suggested in your question, does that mean that the ego created it? And the answer is yes and no. I would suggest that the reality of the world is infinite consciousness or God's infinite being. But being infinite, it has no form. And having no form, it is not manifest. So reality is unmanifest, eternal, infinite, formless, changeless. Now, in order to, and is as such a realm of potential. Now, in order to manifest its infinite potential, what is in fact infinite and formless must seem to become temporary and finite and with form. Now, how does this take place? I would suggest that it takes place in a similar way to the way in which we perceive a dream. The dreamed world is not actually created by our mind because there is no real independently existing dreamed world. So our own mind imagines the dreamed world within itself, but it cannot know the dreamed world directly. In order to know it, our own mind must overlook or forget itself. It must localize itself as an apparently separate subject of experience within its own dream. And it is only from the point of view or the perspective of this localized self in the dream that the dreamer's mind perceives itself as the dreamed world. In other words, the reality of the dreamed world is provided by the dreamer's mind, but the particular view of it depends upon the localized subject within it. It's what William Wordsworth, he expressed it beautifully when he said that the world is half created, half perceived. What he meant by this was that the reality of the world is not created by our finite mind. It exists way beyond the limits of our finite mind. Indeed, our finite mind is just a an emanation of reality. It's a fraction of reality. So the reality of the world is extended way beyond our finite mind. But the way it appears depends upon the finite mind from whose perspective or through whose agency it is known. So the reality of the world is much larger than the finite mind. It is the activity of God's mind, the activity of infinite consciousness. But the appearance of the world depends upon the nature of the finite mind, or the limitations of the finite mind through which it is perceived. So this is what Wordsworth meant: half created, half perceived. It is so the world is perceived by the finite mind in the sense that the world exists prior to and independent of the finite mind, and the finite mind simply perceives it. But then he says the finite mind creates. What he means is creates the appearance of the world. So the finite mind is a pair of like a pair of glasses that conditions the appearance of the world. In that sense, it doesn't create the reality of the world, but it creates the appearance of the world. So what we know of the world is an interaction between God's infinite mind and each of our finite minds. And of course, understand that each of our finite minds is simply a localization of God's infinite mind. It is not a standalone mind. So God's mind localizes itself within its own activity as a seemingly separate subject of experience. And then what we call the universe is the interaction between infinite consciousness and the finite mind that it seems temporarily to be. The world derives its reality from infinite consciousness, which is extended way beyond the mind, but it derives its particular appearance from the limitations of the mind through which it is perceived. And it's important to see that everything that we know of, everything that we perceive about the world that is finite, comes as a result of the glasses of the mind through which we perceive it. But its nature, its essence, this is why I referred to Neda's song, everything I see is God's infinite. Everything we see is in fact the activity of infinite consciousness. But the way it appears depends upon the glasses of the mind through which we perceive it. And time and space, I'm not just talking about the objects in the world, the events and the objects in the world. I would suggest that time and space themselves are part of the appearance of reality. Time and space are not themselves inherent in reality. The reason we see time and space is because of the limitations of the mind through which we perceive reality. Time and space are part of the appearance. They are not inherent in reality itself. So in that sense, that's a different, it's a different response to my first response. It admits there is something called creation, but still from this point of view, there is nothing in creation other than God's being. Creation appears as the world that we know due to the limitations of the finite mind through which we perceive it.
Well, that helps a lot, and I will meditate on that, and it's really helpful. Thank you, Rupert.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave and Rupert. And what a great question. It's a question that many course students have. And wow, you gave us a great answer for it. Thank you, Rupert. And we have Ron Friedman, you have your hand up. Would you please unmute your mic?
Thank you. Thank you. And hello, Rupert. Your presentation of truth has really been so important in my life. So let me ask you something. One of my favorite quotes, which you quote in The Nature of Consciousness, is Wang Po. And I'm going to rephrase it, maybe not exactly, but don't overlook the real in the illusion. And I am wondering, and I'm experiencing the fact that the I am presence is always present. In fact, it is the very basis of the reality that we attribute to experience. But I tried to imagine removing the I am presence from experience, and it was horrendous. It was like dying, like everything turned to dust. So my question is it correct to say that the I am presence is present in all of our experience, lends the experience of reality to the illusion, but it is always present whether we are conscious of it or not?
Yes, the quote, Ron, was from Huang Po. People ignore the reality of the illusory world. And this follows on very nicely from the conversation with Dave. There are these two, or seemingly two, elements. There is reality and the illusion, or the way reality appears. So the reality, in my last conversation with Dave, I suggested that the reality of the universe is God's infinite being or infinite consciousness. As such, the universe is the activity of infinite consciousness, but its appearance depends upon the mind through which it is perceived. The mind through which it is perceived makes or renders the infinite as a finite world. Our minds make God's infinite being, the activity of infinite consciousness, look like a multiplicity and diversity of objects. Now, if we only see the multiplicity and diversity of objects, and we allow the objects to veil their reality, infinite consciousness, then the objects acquire a reality of their own. They appropriate the reality that properly belongs to infinite consciousness, and they seem, as a result, to be real in their own right. Just as one who is watching a movie and is lost in it, they think the tiger in the movie is real in its own right. They lose sight of the screen. The screen is the reality of the tiger. The tiger is an illusion, an appearance of its reality. If we lose sight of the reality, in fact, you never lose sight of the reality, because all you're ever seeing when you're watching a movie is the screen. It's not possible to lose sight of reality because there is nothing other than reality to see. But if we believe that we are no longer seeing the screen, but we are seeing a tiger, then the tiger will appropriate the reality that really belongs to the screen. Likewise, if we overlook or forget that reality is a single, infinite, indivisible whole whose nature is consciousness, spirit, or love, then objects and people will acquire or seem to acquire an independent existence in their own right. And this is the birth of separation, multiplicity, and diversity. So it is not necessary for the appearance to go away. It is necessary to see, as it were, through the appearance, to the reality behind it. Even this is not quite right, because the reality doesn't lie behind the appearance. It shines in and as the appearance.
Yes.
Just as the reality of the tiger the screen doesn't lie behind the image, it shines as the image. So it is not the appearance that veils its reality. It is our belief that the multiplicity and diversity of objects that appear are independently existing objects. It is that belief that seems to veil their reality. So, on to the second part of your question, is it true that this reality is always present? Well, yes, it's true that this reality is always present. How could reality not be present? If reality was not present, what would be present in its place? So there's no question of this reality, infinite consciousness, not being present, because there is nothing else that could be present. There is just a single, infinite, unchanging whole, whose nature is consciousness, spirit, or love, modulating itself in all the appearances that we see, but never actually ceasing to be itself. So it's important to understand this, because very often, particularly in the Advaita teaching, the traditional Advaita teaching, the word illusion is sometimes used to describe something that doesn't really exist. And so we hear phrases like, the world is an illusion, it's not real, it's not really there. No, this is not what is meant. An illusion is not something that does not exist. It is something that does exist, but is not what it appears to be. So the world is not non-existent, it is illusory. It is real, but it is not what it appears to be. Its reality is infinite consciousness.
So
does that answer your question, Ron?
You have answered it. What I'm trying to ask, and I think you have answered it, is the reality bleeding through even when we experience the illusion. In other words, I think you have answered that. I think you have said that. It's just a strange experience that whether we believe it or not, the reality, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go on.
Whether we believe it or not, the I am presence is still, or the reality is still there, and gives even the illusion as the mind, the sense of reality.
Yes, it is for this reason, Ron, that we all feel that our experience is real.
Yes.
Whatever experience we're having, even if we're dreaming that we are flying across the Himalayas, when we are having that experience, it feels as real as does our waking state experience. And there is a reality to our dream of flying across the Himalayas. Likewise, there is a reality to this waking state experience. There is nothing that is not real. How could there be something that is not real? What would its status be?
You're done?
So everything is real, but it is not real as a thing. The reality of the apparent thing is infinite consciousness or spirit or love.
Thank you. I think you certainly have answered my question.
Nice to meet you, Ron.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Tricia Hayes, would you please unmute your mic?
Thank you, Bill. Hi, Rupert.
Hello, Tricia.
I met you in Wales in 2018, in Buckland
Okay,
Hall.
I can't see you yet. Oh, there you are. Yes. Hi, nice to see you again.
Lovely retreat as always. Rupert, you say so much that makes so much sense, and it's almost like then I think, oh, there's my question gone, there's my question gone, and they kind of keep disappearing. And then, but I'm left always with this question of, if I'm knowingly the presence of awareness, shall we say, and you're knowingly the presence of awareness, then in a way, don't we just have a choice of either talking like we're the characters and knowingly the characters and just talking about our roles, or we just stop talking completely because we're completely amazed that we're both knowingly aware. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, Tricia. And indeed, some people, on recognizing their essential nature or the essential nature of reality, do indeed choose to stop talking. Not only do they never speak or write or teach about these matters, that they stop talking altogether, because they realize not a single word I say is true. And I would agree, not a single word that I or anyone has ever said is true. Now, there are two possibilities that we can choose between on understanding this. One is, as you say, to stop speaking. That would be the most eloquent, the most truthful expression of this understanding, would be simply to stop speaking. Or we may decide to keep speaking. And I don't just mean speaking about these matters. I mean conversing in general, as you said, in your question. We may continue to keep speaking, acting, relating, whilst knowing that nothing we say is absolutely true, and yet everything we say, or at least much of what we say, evokes truth. It's what Picasso said about art. He said, all art tells a lie, but it points to the truth. Everything I say is a lie. Everything that all the teachers of all the traditions have ever said is a lie. But much of it points to the truth. Much of it, if it comes from the recognition of the nature of reality, it has a certain power within it. And the power, that power is the power to take the listener or the reader.
Just the bucket flame she filled.
The power in the words is the power to take the listener or the reader to the understanding from which the words came. Tricia, have I answered your question?
Yes, you have, Rupert. It's just, I think with me, it's almost like it's kind of torturous at the moment for some reason, because it's just like playing a character and knowing you're a character. And it's even harder, I think, when I'm with people who also know they are characters, and it's like, where do I go? Where do we go with this? It can just get so, yeah. And
but you do what we're doing here. You gather together out of love of truth and love of love, and you use words and actions to explore that and to celebrate that.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, have you ever known an actor or an actress saying, well, I know that I'm not really the part that I play, and nothing I say is true, therefore I'm going to give up my career as an actor or an actress? No, it enables them to play their part even better, even more fully, because they don't lose contact with their knowledge of their self.
Oh, okay, that's lovely.
So don't feel badly, Tricia, about relating in this way with relative terms, trying to express something which ultimately cannot be expressed. Enjoy it. We all know that words are limited. We all understand that the ultimate truth cannot be described in words. But there's something beautiful about using form to indicate the formless. That is the impulse behind all artistic creativity. It is the impulse behind all scientific endeavor. All honest scientists know that it's not possible to know the nature of reality with the finite mind. Do they give up as a result of this? No, they probe and they probe and they probe. It's a beautiful endeavor. It's a way in which the mind accommodates itself more and more and more intimately to its reality. It's the way the mind immerses itself in its reality, melts into its reality, surrenders to its reality. It's beautiful. Enjoy it, celebrate it, share it.
That's lovely. Thank you, Rupert. I knew you'd...
Nice to see you again.
It's lovely to see you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tricia and Rupert. And our next hand is Ted and Lauren. Ted, can you unmute your mic, please?
So, first of all, thank you so much, Rupert. I've heard you before. I get so much out of your presentations. I have a very specific question, and that is that, I totally get the idea of who I am, that my basic nature is awareness, and that's where the joy and peace will be found. And I have experienced that, and I can experience it, and it's been very helpful, for example, in difficult social situations or, grievances with people, that kind of thing. But one area of life that I can't get a handle on this is I have had several medical issues. And I have recently been living with a lot of pain, physical pain. And when I'm in physical pain, I go to this place of, I don't want to be alive. I think about finding a way really to end my life because the pain has been so bad. And clearly in those moments, I am very distant from experiencing my I am presence, the I am awareness. I'm looking for tools or suggestions or help from you about when, my whole world is this physical pain, and I can't wait until the 6 hours is up before I can take my next pain medication. Just to get through those hours, that I can't apply. That's it. That's my question. How to apply it when the body is in so much pain? Thank you.
Ted, I would suggest that your desire to be rid of pain is not in any way a failure of your understanding. It is completely natural to want to get rid of pain. That's the purpose of pain. The purpose of pain, it should be painful. It should be unpleasant. That's the message that the body sends to us to attend to it. The fact that you want to get rid of the pain is not a sign of ignorance. It's not a failure of your understanding. It is a natural response to pain. And you obviously have done, and I would suggest you are quite right to have done and to be doing everything you possibly can to get rid of or alleviate the pain. So having done that, what else remains to be done? Then all that you can do is know yourself, and more importantly, feel yourself as the spaciousness, the openness within which the pain arises. You can't do more than that.
That does not help with the pain.
Ted, this understanding doesn't claim to alleviate physical pain. It claims to alleviate suffering.
Got it. Yeah, that one of the lessons of the pain is that there is a huge difference between suffering and pain. That's been one of the big lessons for me.
Yes, physical pain is physical pain.
I'm learning to recognize when I'm suffering and that I have created the suffering, and that is different than the pain.
Exactly. Physical pain is a sensation, like the experience of hunger, or the sunlight on your face, or your hand on your lap, or the table. These are sensations. Physical pain is an intense sensation. It has nothing to do with unhappiness or suffering, which is an emotional experience. We all know from our own experience that we can be in perfect circumstances and miserable. And we can be in awful circumstances and blissfully happy. So when I talk about circumstances, I mean physical circumstances. I mean pain. So it's true that there is some crossover in that our emotional suffering, if it is chronic, may give rise to tension in the body, which will be experienced or may be experienced in extreme cases as pain. So it is possible that pain can be caused, at least in part, by emotional suffering. But we should be very careful not to imply from this that all physical pain, or indeed all illness, is caused by the lack of recognition of our true nature. In other words, by ignorance. It is not, and it's an uncompassionate point of view. And I would suggest an erroneous point of view to say that all suffering, or all physical pain, or all illness is a result of ignorance.
I understand. Thank you.
You know, even Christ on the cross, do you think he asked for this experience, to be relieved of the experience? Do you think he didn't feel physical pain? How many sages do we know that died of illness? This understanding, it claims to be a source of love, peace, and joy, not a source of pleasant sensations. But having said that, Ted, I feel for you, and I wish you the very best with your condition.
Thank you very much.
And I would suggest that your evident love of truth, even in your darkest moment, will shine through your pain. It's beautiful to see that.
Thank you so much, Rupert. I appreciate it. Thank you. Nice
to meet you both. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted. And thank you, Rupert. Anaya, would you please unmute your mic? Anaya? There you go.
Okay.
Turn your camera? Can you turn your video camera on too, please?
No, I'm sorry. I am not. I don't feel comfortable turning my camera on. If that's okay.
It's up to you and Rupert.
Is that okay, Rupert?
Yes.
I have a feeling that you answer my question 1,000 times before, but the question persists, and I know it's coming from my limited mind, and intellectually I am kind of keeping pace with the teaching, but the question is still here. I'm sorry about my accent. And I had this realization some time ago that I do not know how to love God. So I started reading about
You do not know how to what?
love God. That I have no idea as a person how to love God.
Okay, let's pause there, because one, it's difficult to hear you, more difficult because I can't see you, but I've understood your question. You want to love God. You've recognized you can't love God as a person, and you're right. Sorry,
Yes.
tell me your name again.
Anya.
Aya, you are right. You can't. There you are. Thank you for turning your camera on. You're right. You can't love God because the belief that there is a you with its own independent existence, its own existence independent of God, prevents you from what you call loving God. Loving God is being God. You cannot love God. In order to love God, the self that would love God or not must come to an end. In fact, it doesn't need to come to an end because it never really existed to begin with. You have to see that the self that you believe yourself to be, that wishes to love God and that knows that she cannot love God, is an illusion. She's not there. Your being is God's being, the only being there is. To love, when you love someone, you know this from your relative experience. When you love someone, you feel that you are not separate from them. You are them. Your separate identities collapse. That is the experience of love. You no longer exist as two entities. You recognize or realize your shared being. Well, that's what loving God means, recognizing that there is no separate, independent you. Your being is God's being, the only being there is. That is loving God.
Yes, I guess I got confused because Saint Teresa, for example, like when I am reading her writings, there seems to be the servant, the person, Saint Teresa, and then there is master.
Yes, the traditional devotional literature, particularly in the Christian, the Sufi, and the Hindu traditions, expresses itself in subject-object relationship. It is just a poetic form.
Oh, okay.
It's just a manner of speaking. Rumi said, Lord, in the existence of your love, I become non-existent. That's still slightly couched in non-dual, in dualistic language, but at the same time indicating the non-existence of the self who loves God. So that's about as close as you can come in dualistic language. But Rumi, on many other occasions, expressed this understanding in conventional dualistic language: master and servant, lover and beloved, servant and Lord. This is a linguistic convention, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful form. I love the traditional the traditional dualistic devotional literature, I have a prayer that I say to myself every day. Oh, my Lord, my whole being is yourself. And this mind which has been given me is your attendant. The life force, breath, and energy which you have given me is your consort. This body is the temple in which I worship you. Whatever I eat or wear or do is all part of the worship I keep on performing at this temple. Whenever I walk, I feel I'm going on pilgrimage to you. Whatever I speak is all in praise of you. Whatever I do in this world in any way is all aimed at you. So there is no duality in this life between myself and you. I said this prayer to myself every day for the last 45 years. It's traditional dualistic language. Every time I say it, it melts my heart. Of course, I understand that the me, oh my Lord, my whole being is your self, and this mind which has been given me is your consort. It's all me and you. It's just a form, it's just poetry. Allow yourself, don't stop at the words. Understand that the felt understanding from which these words have come. But realize that I would suggest in most cases, or let's say in many cases, the people who wrote these prayers, they understood the non-dual nature of reality. And to be honest, even if they didn't, even if they felt their self as a self apart from God's self, their devotion for and love of God was such that we should not judge their apparently dualistic views. Such views are redeemed by the depth and the extent of the love which initiates them. I wish you the very best, Ania. Nice to meet you, and thank you for turning on your camera.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left, and Joan de Groot, would you please unmute your mic?
Yes.
And
All right. Can you hear me?
Video on? Yes. There you are.
Yes. There I am. Thank you. Rupert, what a revelation. Thank you so much.
Oh, I was just listening to Rupert Spira, who I find fascinating.
Let's pause for a minute, Joan, while we mute this mic.
It's muted.
Okay, let's try now.
Okay, right. And I all of a sudden feel as if when I don't choose between my self and ego, which is something that I have been thinking and trying to do somehow, but not really succeeding, then it now sort of feels to me as if I'm on a huge open space where I'm moving in a direction where I already am, but still as if it has not completely been turned on. Like, you know, how, like a dimmer with a light that you can dim completely until it's dark, but you can also turn it on completely. And now it feels as if I would be able to just, you know, stop dimming this light. Then it would just be there.
Can I
just
interrupt?
wait. Yes,
Can I just
sorry.
interrupt you for a minute, Joan? Could you try to formulate your question simply and clearly?
Yes, I know. Is this true to be on a journey towards this light, or is it that I am already this light and I'm just not aware enough of it already?
It's the latter, but the process of becoming aware of the light that you already are seems to be a journey for the one who doesn't yet realize that they are that light. So, in other words, if you intuit that you are that light, which you obviously do, and yet you don't quite feel yet that you are, then the you that seems not yet to be that light seems to have to go on a journey, and you should take that journey.
Mm-hmm.
When you recognize yourself as that light, you will realize, oh, I never left myself. I never ceased being myself. I never became a separate self or a person. There was no real ignorance. I never came back to myself. I simply seemed to veil myself with my own activity, and then I unveiled myself again. But as long as that seems not to be the case, then there is a journey to be undertaken. Take the journey.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Joan. I wish you the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Zoe in Texas, would you please unmute your mic?
Yes. Hi. Hello, Rupert.
Hello, Zoe.
Thank you for this presentation. I am scattered in my thoughts. I loved what you just told Joan, because I have a modest meditation practice where I look to what my awareness is looking at, but I struggle with, I'm identifying as this awareness. So I can acknowledge that I'm noticing the green light on my computer or the things around me. I notice that I get distracted by the objects around me. But I don't know how to, I guess, is it realize myself? I mean, then duality disappears. So do you go in and out of that? And I know that's another question. I'm a little nervous.
Zoe, what you've described so far is that you, awareness, give your attention to the content of your experience, the green light on your computer, your thoughts, your perceptions, etc. What is important is not simply for you, awareness, to witness the content of your experience, although that is sometimes a helpful first stage. What is important is for you, awareness, to be aware of yourself.
I feel like I've done that, but I can't. I'm wanting something to happen. I'm wanting a realization or some ground of peace. You know, I'm looking for a peace.
If you're wanting something to happen, it means you're still looking to change the content of your experience. You're not yet interested in truth or reality. You're looking to improve your experience.
Well, okay.
If you become
be able to realize myself as.
Let's just do an experiment, Zoe. Just become aware now of the fact of being aware. Just the obvious, ordinary, intimate, familiar fact, I am aware. Okay?
I can notice that.
Perfect,
yeah.
Perfect. Now, tell us about that awareness.
I will tell you a report about the sensations in my body.
That wasn't the question. I didn't ask you about your sensations.
Okay.
I asked you to, I mean, you could tell us about your sensations, but that's not what we want now, because our question is about, your question was about awareness. So Don't tell us about your sensations. Tell us about the fact of being aware or awareness.
My awareness informs me of the illusory things, and I take that by your definition, but it's probably true.
Now you're telling us about thoughts. We want to know about the fact of being aware, not about your thoughts, your feelings, your illusions, your perceptions, your sensations. We want to know about the fact of being aware or awareness itself. You have the...
I'm aware?
What?
Like, how do I know I'm aware?
No. We already know that you know you are aware. It's obvious. Being aware is the most obvious element of experience. We want to know about the nature of the awareness you are. I want you to tell us more about it. When you say, I am aware, tell us about that experience.
All I come up with is...
Zoe, pause there. Pause there. That was the perfect answer. You've just given me the answer I was hoping for. You went silent, you stuttered a bit, you tried again, you couldn't say anything, you went silent again, you tried again, but you couldn't find the words. That's perfect. You couldn't find anything to say about it. Why not? Because there's nothing objective there to say anything about. In other words, in awareness, there is absolutely no desire to change the content of experience. When you say, I want to change the content of experience, or I'm looking for a marvelous experience, you are not speaking on behalf of awareness. You're speaking on behalf of your finite mind. You awareness.
So I really can never speak about the nature of awareness, truly, can I?
Ultimately, not a word we say about the nature of awareness is true. The best we can say is I am and I know, or I am and I am aware. If we wanted to split hairs, we could even take exception with those statements, but let's allow ourselves these statements. It's right. It's not possible to say ultimately anything true about awareness apart from I am and I know, because awareness is objectless or contentless, and all of our language has evolved to describe the content of experience. And the reason I'm saying all this, Zoe, is because you said, I'm still looking for something extraordinary to happen.
Or a shift. It doesn't need to be extraordinary. It just needs...
When you say that, well, you're still looking for something to happen. When you say that, it betrays the fact that you are still looking at the content of your experience. You're looking for a marvelous experience. Awareness is not a marvelous experience. It is the background of all and the reality, the substance of all experience. But don't look for it in your experience, and particularly not as a marvelous experience. And the reason we went through that exercise is that I wanted to not just give you the theory, I wanted you to taste for yourself the fact that awareness is empty of objectivity. And you actually, by falling silent and finding it impossible to say anything about awareness, you acknowledged, without possibly realizing it, that your experience of being aware is present, knowing, but devoid of content, particularly devoid of the content of wanting to have a marvelous experience.
It's thoughtless.
It's thoughtless, it's objectless, and therefore it is at peace.
So I shouldn't endeavor to, I seek my identity as that. No, people talk about I amness, and I don't know about Course in Miracles, but
So
am I not seeking to find myself?
If I were to ask you now, and I'm now referring to you as a person, as a woman, Zoe, If I were to say to you now, Zoe, get up and go and search all around your house for yourself, what would you do?
Well, I would probably eventually sit still in a chair.
I think I don't believe that you'd go off into your kitchen looking for yourself.
No.
You cannot look for yourself because you are yourself. Now, that was just an analogy. The finite mind cannot look for awareness because its very nature is awareness. It's like an actor, John Smith, who plays the part of King Lear. King Lear can't go around looking for John Smith. John Smith is his very nature. He is John Smith. So you, the person, Zoe, cannot look for awareness because awareness is the you that is doing the looking. You are already that you seek. So this is about recognizing what you are, not seeking or becoming something else. It's just the clear recognition. Oh yes, I mistook myself for a cluster of thoughts, images, feelings, sensations, perceptions, activities, and relationships, whilst all the time I was this clear, open, empty, luminous, unlimited presence. It's just about recognizing, remembering.
When you recognized yourself as awareness, do you stay there or do you blip back and forth?
To begin with, there seems to be a back and forth. But in time, the back and forth diminishes until at some point you are stable in this felt understanding.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, Zoe. I wish you the best.
Thank you. Thank you, Zoe, and thank you, Rupert. And thank you, everyone. We've come to the end of our time, Rupert. And you have been very generous with great explanations. And once again, you've given us a lot to consider and a lot for A Course in Miracles students, as well as people that follow you regularly. I recognize many people that I've seen in your webinars. And I've posted a link for Rupert on the speaker page. It has everything you need to know about making contact with Rupert, and I'll post it again here in the chat. So please click on that link before we close the session with Rupert. And Rupert, thank you so much for being here. Do you have any final words before we close this meeting?
Just thank you, Bill and Lisa, for gathering us all together this weekend. It's a truly beautiful endeavor. And thank all of you for your love of truth and your love of God. And it's lovely to be with you all again. Thank you.